Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your Amac podcast, Better for America. If you haven't yet done so, just hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a BFA episode. Now, today we have the honor of having a leader in Congress, Vice Chairman of the House Republican Conference, current Assistant Whip, former head of the Republican Study Committees, and both a doer and a thinker, and that's Congressman Mike Johnson. Now, Congressman Johnson is a legislative leader and a shaper of national policy. He comes to us with 2 decades of experience in constitutional law, service on the House Judiciary Committee, and is widely recognized as a fighter for constitutional rights and the civil liberties of all Americans. He also serves on the House Armed Services Committee, a role that places him in a vital position for protecting our national security. From Louisiana, he knows what it means to represent veterans and current military bases and commands, and so he has really valuable insights on defense. He is a former litigator, a defender of free speech, free worship, and the Second Amendment, not to mention free markets. But most of all, he is a patriot and a friend of Amac, shoulder to shoulder in the fight for freedom. Please welcome Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana's 4th District. Congressman, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, Rebecca, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Congressman, I do want to jump in and turn right to matters of national security. You sit on the crucial Armed Services Committee in Congress, and we have so many issues of consequence that come before that body, and your voice is obviously very important. So I want to ask you 2 big questions. First, where do you think the Russian invasion of Ukraine leads? How serious is this for global security? And second, and perhaps more specifically, we heard Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky deliver a powerful speech before Congress. He's pleading with America to do more. Now, we know that Ukraine wants a no-fly zone, and I've been hearing opinions from both sides of the aisle, with both Republicans and Democrats in support of or against creating a no-fly zone over some portion or potentially all of Ukraine. Zelensky himself said, is this too much to ask that Russia won't be able to terrorize free cities? What is your position on this issue, and what might be the operational risks and global consequences either way? Big question.
Yeah, big question. And to begin where you started with this, I think it's difficult to overstate the importance of this conflict and how it is resolved. Because, as we always say, as Reagan used to say, the great doctrine is we maintain peace through strength. And of course, what he meant by that, and what we all know intuitively, is that weakness invites aggression. We see that on vivid display right now. The reason that Vladimir Putin has made this unprovoked brought war on Ukraine, is because he saw an opportunity. I mean, that's just an objective fact. We are projecting weakness on the world stage right now, and it's a very, very dangerous time to be doing so. That comes straight from the White House. And, we have other rogue nations, dictators and tyrants and terrorists everywhere who are feeling empowered and emboldened to do the same thing. Of course, we have talked openly now about the very real risk that China may make a move on Taiwan. You have North Korea making noise, working on their nuclear program. You have Iran and the pending nuclear deal, which is madness, beginning and preparing to arm and fire missiles. So this is a very dangerous time. What happens with the Russian aggression here, I think, could be a bellwether for some of these other potential conflicts. And so we have to take it very, very seriously. We thought President Zelensky did an exceptional job in his speech to the joint session of Congress yesterday. That was a rare event. He got rousing standing ovations from both sides of the aisle. We all stood together and applauded his courage and his zeal. And the bottom line here is real simple. We have, I think, a national interest, as well as I think probably a moral responsibility. I think we can argue that, to help him defend the safety and security of his people and to defend freedom against this tyrant, Vladimir Putin, who is pushing beyond the boundaries. This is the biggest aggression since World War II. That said, we do not need to get engaged in an outright war with Russia. We don't need American boots on the ground over there. That is not our responsibility. So it's a very, very delicate balance, a line that we're walking right now.
Yes, it certainly is. Boy. Well, we're praying that, it's a shame that we have such a weak president. We're seeing such a lack of leadership from Washington. And I think that that's really quite concerning because this is a very crucial moment for sure. So I thank you so much. And as you look at the next year and then perhaps the next several years, do you think that America's adversaries perceive this administration as weak? You said they do, right? So you mentioned that they do, but can you elaborate a little bit more? And I'm talking like, especially after the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal, do you think that our disunity, sown by forces that really want to pull us apart, is seen by our adversaries as really an opportunity to challenge us? And then also, do you think that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and other adversaries perhaps are in part responsible for fanning our internal divisions?
Those are great issues. We could do entire programs just on those questions, right? I mean, I think that clearly there is this perception around the world, and we should pause here and note the reason that we have to maintain peace through strength is because it is the perception of a strong America that so many times over the last 245 years since we've been a nation, it's the perception of a strong America, certainly after World War II, that has prevented conflicts around the world. It has held the terrorists and tyrants and the dictators like Putin at bay because they feared what we may do. We have been the bulwark of liberty and freedom. We have been the great defenders, and not because we have to be the world's policeman, but because they see America as the great superpower, the great strength. And so if that is imperiled, then it is a threat to the security and the sanctity, the sovereignty of our own nation, and the security of people all around the world. And so that's why this is a very, very serious matter and a very serious time. Now, have some of these other adversaries contributed to this? Are they reveling in our disunity and our projection of weakness right now? Of course they are. They've been waiting for this opportunity. Some of these tyrants, and I do think that it is inarguably true that they've contributed. I mean, you look at what China's done to meddle in our national affairs. I mean, TikTok, for example, is the biggest social media tool, the biggest platform, I think, in the whole country, mostly geared towards younger Americans. And there's just poisonous material that comes across on TikTok. It's owned and controlled by the Chinese. They don't allow their own children onto these platforms, but they love sowing discord among Americans and American youth. And so, you have meddling in our elections and we don't need to relitigate all that. But the point is that in the age of social media, in the age of everything being digitized, with these new platforms that are out there to share misinformation, disinformation, clearly many of these malign actors are involved. And we need to be on guard against that. We need to do everything we can to prevent their meddling in our domestic affairs, because it has real world consequences, certainly at a time like this.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, because your perspective is really invaluable. And I think that we all know that we're living through such challenging times, so that it's important to hear that. Thank you. I want to understand what you're seeing in Washington, perhaps even globally, from where you sit. Do you think that America may see a rebirth of freedom after the 2022 midterm elections? Can we take back our country and restart or return, to prioritizing individual liberties, not bigger government?
Oh, absolutely. My wife and I just launched our own podcast, ironically, this week.
Ah,
And,
that's
and
wonderful.
yeah, and we
Congratulations.
well, thanks. It was birthed out of necessity, Rebecca, because these very questions are things that we're asked all the time. We do seminars in churches on Sunday nights, and we do town halls, of course, in my district, and we do a lot of public speaking, et cetera. And at the end of all of these events, people come up to us and ask that question: is it too late? Can we save America? Can we keep the republic? And look, I want to be the first to say here, we said this was the subject of our first podcast, our inaugural episode this week. It's Truth Be Told with Mike and Kelly Johnson. But we talked for 45 minutes about this very subject. I am very bullish on the subject and the future of America. All right. I believe in the old Reagan doctrine, not just peace through strength, but he often said that we are the last best hope of man on the earth. He likened us to that biblical shining city on a hill, of course. And the reason that Reagan believed so much in America and our future prospects, and the reason we still do as well, is because we are still the greatest hope that has not been diminished. And as dark as the days seem, and as bad as everything seems right now, and all the crises that are mounting because of terrible policy choices largely, it's not too late to turn it around. And I believe I'm very encouraged by this, Rebecca, because if you look at the polling right now, of course, we know that most Americans are being awakened to these truths. They are recognizing that elections really do have consequences, and very real and present dangers can come from bad policy choices. People are feeling less secure. They're feeling very unsettled. They know that prices are skyrocketing. They know the border's open. They know that all these things have happened because we had an election cycle that went the other way. And so I believe that there is going to be a turning here very soon. I think the pendulum is going to swing pretty wildly in the next election cycle. I think the polling verifies that now. The question is, in which direction will it swing? And I think it's critically important for all patriots, all people who love this country as you and I do, all people of faith, to be prepared right now to give an answer for the hope that we have. The reason that we believe in those time-honored founding principles, individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity, the sanctity of all human life, those are, right now, they're deemed to be sort of conservative principles, but more fundamental than that, those are the quintessential American principles that made us the greatest nation, the most free, most powerful, most successful nation in the history of the world. We abandon those principles at our peril. I think it's time to get back to them, and I think there is going to be a groundswell of support for that idea.
Congressman, thank you. I think we tend to abandon those principles when we abandon God.
Yeah.
Personally, I mean, you can see that. And so I do pray. I pray for God's divine intervention and wisdom. And it is so good that people like you have the courage to speak out and deliver that message of hope. So I appreciate that. I know that so many AMAC members are really praying for a return to sanity, respect for history, our established traditions and our institutions, really a time when constitutional rights were widely understood to be paramount and not subject to what we're seeing today, this socialist erosion or executive mandates. So I do want to ask you a question, since you do have a deep experience with the law, both as a teacher, a litigator, a constitutional scholar, and a member of the Judiciary Committee. Just a couple of questions that go to our independent judiciary and threats that seem to be mounting to rule of law. Excuse me. As Americans turn against the leftward drift of Congress, and we're seeing that, more rhetoric is rising, and we have seen riots in the past 2 years. Lots of efforts to undermine the Supreme Court's legitimacy, and then desperate measures emerging in Congress. Does this worry you? Have we seen Democrats attempt to kill the filibuster or undermine law enforcement, abandon fiscal discipline? It just seems to me that I don't recall hearing a president talk about packing the Supreme Court, in effect making that branch not independent, but really purely political. Do you think that we can avoid these extreme measures, these turns, and how dangerous are things like trying to kill the filibuster or intimidate the bench? How bad is that for America?
It's terribly corrosive. It's terribly dangerous. Remember that we're only 245 years into this grand experiment in self-governance. And what you said here at the outset about people of faith needing to pray right now, and that this being that being essential to who we are as Americans, it certainly is. And when I'm in front of a group of students or college students, high school students, my own students, I explain the essence of America always began at the nation's birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence, right? And I explain, I'll go up on a whiteboard, Rebecca, when I'm in a large classroom setting, and I'll just write 4 words on the board. I write G-O-D, God, at the very top of the board. Beneath that, in smaller letters, I'll write King with a lowercase k, and then I'll write people, the subjects, below that. I draw arrows from the king down to the people, and I say very simply, at its essence, America is based upon a creed. What is that? G.K. Chesterton, the famous British philosopher, said one time, America is the only nation in the world that's founded upon a creed. And he said it's listed with almost theological lucidity or clarity in the Declaration of Independence. What is the creed? Well, it's articulated in the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So as I'm writing on the whiteboard, I put those 4 words and I say, now listen, We're the first nation in the world that defied what was known as the divine right of kings, the idea that the earthly king is the one that gives the people all their rights, tells them where they can live, what they can do for a living, et cetera. I said, our nation is founded on a totally different idea. I'll erase the word king off the board. We erased the middleman. In our country, it is just of, by, and for the people under God, as Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address. And so it's just between us and God. That's what the Declaration says. It's like a statement of faith. And we abandoned that at our peril. And I said, what's happened right now is that I take the eraser and I erase the word God. And I said, increasingly, we're moving away from that most essential principle. The undergirding, the foundation of a constitutional republic is the necessity of having virtue. And that we find in the virtue in the seedbed of that is religion and morality. We lose that at our peril. And now we've erased the meaning. Increasingly growing numbers of Americans, younger Americans, are denying the existence of God himself. And so it defies our original principles as a nation. It defies the created order, and it puts us in peril. All that is the background to the chaos we see right now, and the crazy ideas that are being perpetuated. And yes, for example, packing the court, by one example, I mean, that hasn't been tried since 1937. And that was the first time it was attempted. Of course, FDR did it, but when he tried to pack the court, remember, Congress was backing up from the rapid expansion of government. He had gone too far. When he did that, he had super majorities of his own party in Congress. In both houses, he had Democrats, and even they resisted the temptation to to pack the court, expand the number of justices, because they knew it would hopelessly politicize that third branch of government. And so now it's as if the Democrats around here, I mean, just down the hallway here in Capitol Hill, they have a razor thin majority right now. This last election cycle, we have a 50-50 split in the US Senate, and Nancy Pelosi has about a 4-vote razor thin majority in the House. They're pretending as though they have super majorities in both houses and that the American people want some sort of mandate to radically transform the republic, to pack the Supreme Court and hopelessly politicize it. It has not been successful. I am optimistic that we can hold them at bay until the next election cycle. And I believe, just put it very plainly, Rebecca, in November, I think all of this is going to change. I think there's going to be a red wave election. I think we're going to take control of both houses of Congress, and we'll be able to turn back some of this madness.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, because that perspective is valuable, and especially on matters of law and preserving our constitutional process. So thank you for being such a keen observer. And I really do love what you say. It's so true. It's why really I love AMAC members get it. They understand the importance of families. That's where all of this really starts, just understanding that each and every one of us is beautifully made and uniquely loved by a powerful creator. And I love that the way that our Declaration of Independence was written, and in the minds of our founding fathers, they had a belief in that almighty, powerful God. So I thank you for reminding of us that. And it's really that simple, but unfortunately, once evil gets in, sometimes it's too late to reverse. So thanks again for that. I do want to ask a follow-up question regarding this Supreme Court, because there are so many big cases that have been argued, cases that could affect the status of Roe v. Wade, and the idea that our Constitution protects abortion, as well as cases we're seeing affecting the Second Amendment, our broader civil rights. And we have what seems maybe a 5-4 or 6-3 majority for a sorry, I can't talk today, judicially conservative, maybe originalist interpretation of the Constitution. Do you think that we will see any big rulings this year? And if so, do you have any fear that Democrats and activists really could try to disrespect these rulings and undermine the authority of the Supreme Court? That's my concern, especially as it relates to Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, great questions. You've got a lot of good ones today, Rebecca, and we could do whole programs on just
I know. We're going to have you back. Yeah.
Well, right. But so on this issue of the sanctity of human life, we have great hope, great anticipation for the Dobbs case out of Mississippi. As everyone knows, that was argued back in December. We have a pending decision there. Will probably come down, my guess is early midsummer. And this is the first time, I believe, in my lifetime that we've had a real opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. There have been a couple of opportunities that came close over the years, but this is the first kind of full frontal assault to the underpinnings, the framework, the extra constitutional framework, as I like to say. There's no right to abortion in the Constitution, of course. They found it magically in the penumbra of fundamental rights listed there. Look, Roe v. Wade is built upon a complete legal fiction, and everyone who looks at it honestly and objectively knows that. The question in the Dobbs case is, as people who are following this know, the state of Mississippi, the legislature proscribed abortion after 15 weeks. And so the question now perfectly presented to the court is, are all pre-viability abortions or restrictions on abortion unconstitutional? If many of us follow this very closely, we are sort of reading between the tea leaves, we listen to the oral arguments very carefully. I used to litigate these cases before I got to Congress. I believe, and I've said this openly, that we have at least 5 of the 9 justices now, thanks in large part to what President Trump was able to do in putting originalists on the court, 3 of those, of course. I believe we have at least 5 votes who are prepared to overturn Roe and return the decision about life to the states. That will be a remarkable turn of events, and it will right a great and grievous wrong that has been put upon our country since 1973 when Roe was enacted. Some people believe that we may actually get a 6-3 ruling. I think most of the experts agree that it's Chief Justice Roberts, who is probably the sort of maybe the undecided vote at this point. I think he recognizes, because he's intellectually consistent, that the framework of Roe is faulty. And so he may wind up going with the other 5 conservative justices, and then we get that question returned to the people. Here's the basic, you don't have to be a constitutional law attorney to understand this. Just remember from Civics 101, if a right is not specified in the Constitution, in our system, in our constitutional republic, the question is given to the people themselves. It was never supposed to be decided by 9 unelected judges on the highest court in the land. It's supposed to be determined through the duly elected representatives of the people in the states, the state legislatures. Well, that right was pulled away from the states in 1973 wrongfully. And the result of that has been at least 63 million unborn children lost in this country. So this is the time. I think this summer may be the moment where we get that question returned to the states, and then the shift in the policy battle then goes to the states instead of the federal level. But there's other cases as well. There's a big Second Amendment case that's pending.
Yes.
The state of New York, since the early 1900s, has been infringing upon the fundamental Second Amendment right to bear arms, and have basically used it in a way that denies equal protection to unfavored classes of folks, and that there may be a chance to right that wrong as well. So some big key issues now. Another reminder to us, Rebecca, that elections really do have consequences. And by the way, everybody knows, by far, I think the longest lasting legacy of any president is who that president puts on the federal courts, especially the Supreme Court. And that will be, I think, President Trump's arguably his longest lasting legacy, the success he had in all that.
I agree there. Yeah. What do you think are some of the other big issues really facing America today? We look at open borders. We see the threats posed by communist China, cyber vulnerabilities we're reading about, hearing about. But again, I look at the weakness of the Biden administration just in general, and almost see that as a threat in and of itself. Because we need strong leadership, as you opened with. So what do you see as the leading threats here in America? And are we ready to make what could be really hard decisions? Are we ready to make those hard decisions?
Well, we're going to have to. If you poll the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the top brass of America's military, our Defense Department, you ask them, and we do frequently. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, Judiciary Committee. We asked the leaders of our military under oath, what is the greatest threat to America? Many people would expect you to say China or maybe Russia. They say the national debt. And so all those crises, and the ones you mentioned, are certainly clear and present dangers to us. The open border alone is I think one of the greatest threats to our sovereignty and stability as a nation. We've had millions of people come across the border since President Biden opened it up. It's been fair game, and that has led to all sorts of secondary effects. The illicit drug trade, for example. I mean, fentanyl overdoses are now the #1 cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. The #1 cause. It's completely preventable. The reason this has happened is because they opened the border. So it goes on and on and on. But The national debt is one of the things that hangs over all of our heads. We have a $30 trillion federal debt. Older Americans, retired persons, this is a very serious concern for all of us, particularly those of advanced age, because we know that Social Security and Medicare, for example, are very close to being bankrupted programs, right? They will go belly up in just a short number of years. And so the trajectory we're on, the spending that we're on now with interest rates rising, this is a very, very serious threat to the country. And of course, our adversaries are wringing their hands over this in joy. China, for example, is a big creditor of ours. They love this. They love that we're spending like drunken sailors on Capitol Hill, right? We can't afford to do that anymore. So that's where the tough choices come in. And if we don't get our own house in order, we will not have the ability to stand strong against our enemies and our adversaries. And we may not always be, there's no guarantee that we can remain the world's last superpower. In fact, that's in real question right now. We better get very serious about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. I do want to turn to the positive for a moment. This is our final question, and we so appreciate your time. Thank you for this. But one thing that seems increasingly clear is that average Americans, and of course millions of our AMAC members, they are increasingly tired of being talked down to. They're tired of these mandates. And being told that their money is not theirs. And they're also fed socialist and Marxist notions. So we're seeing everything from critical race theory, as you mentioned, overspending, which, by the way, my father, founder of AMAC, who's no longer with us, he always said the national debt, that is something, and this was, when we were 10 trillion less, you know what I mean, in debt than we are now. So, but we see all of this. Americans are seeing it, that overspending and cultural disruption. There's this cultural disruption that's redefining who we are, who America is. We're seeing things like gender, biology, and math. Those things are not what they used to be. So do you think that we may be at some kind of inflection or tipping point, a place where threats to society and our Constitution and these established norms somehow unify our nation and strengthen us spiritually or culturally, and really allow us to take back what is being lost? Because what I'm seeing more today than I saw a year ago are more and more people recognizing and agreeing on some common ground, like critical race theory, as an example. So I'm optimistic like you, Congressman. Do you see this really bringing us together, perhaps?
I think there's a very real possibility of that. And I'm an eternal optimist. I'm bullish on America. As I said at the outset, I believe our best days are still ahead of us. And as is often said, it's darkest right before the dawn, right? So the only good news about everything being in the condition it's in right now is it wakes people up. And there's a couple of presuppositions to keep a constitutional republic like we have. Remembering, again, we're still an experiment on the world stage. We're only 245 years old as a nation. That is nothing on the whole span of human history, but we can salvage this thing, and we can thrive again as a people, as a nation, if we return to our founding principles. And they're not complicated. This is very simple stuff. The idea that, as the Declaration articulates, as we said moments ago, that we're all created by God, that we have an allegiance to Him, that these religious and moral principles are critical to maintain a system of government like ours. When we do that, we can restore the people's faith in our institutions. That is another critical presupposition to keep a republic. And ultimately, that people will be more engaged and informed. All these things are necessary to do what we must do as a country to maintain our exceptional status as a people and as a country. And I think that people are yearning for that again. And the challenge is for your members, for people like us who believe in these time-honored principles, who love America and are grateful to God and walk in the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom, as Scripture says, that we have to be more open and articulate these things more now than we ever have before. This is the time for conviction and consistency and clarity, and to share these truths, to pass, as Reagan said, freedom's not inherited, right? It's not passed through the bloodstream. You have to teach it, you have to instruct it, you have to speak about it to the next generation of Americans so that we can pass that torch of liberty to them. We have that opportunity, we have that challenge. It's a great time to be alive if you know the answers, and your members do. And so this is the time for all of us to use every sphere of influence that we have to speak up and speak loudly and do it with great conviction. And I think I think we can still save this last best hope of man on the earth.
Oh, thank you, Congressman. Thank you so much for your insights and your voice on all of these issues because it is so important. I do want you to share one more time with those listening. How do we get to your podcast? What is the name you said?
Yeah,
Beyond
thanks.
the Truth?
Well,
Go
so
ahead.
Truth Be Told with Mike
Truth
and
be
Kelly
told.
Johnson. It's on all the podcast platforms, and we literally just launched it Monday. And my producer told me right before I came on with you that in 24 hours we've already reached near the top 5% of all podcasts. So there's an audience for these
Wow.
three. Yeah, it's
Holy
really something.
crow.
My wife is
Isn't
the
that
star.
great?
Okay, Rebecca, she's the star of the show. But
Oh, she sounds, yeah, she's got some tricks up her sleeve. She knows how to get it out there. That's really wonderful. And I say that mainly because we're in an age of censorship. And so, your voice, sir, the things that you say are so important and wonderful and should be shared. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more conservative voices in America get shut up. So I congratulate your wife for making sure that your message gets out there. I can't wait to listen.
well, thanks a lot. We appreciate that. And you're right. All of us are getting censored in silence, but that's some other stuff that's going to change when we get the majority in Congress again. I promise you we'll get some reforms in that area as well. So I just want to
Amen.
thank you, Rebecca, for your voice, for all that you all do to keep that torch of freedom lit. And we're applauding you and praying for your success and all your members. And let us be a resource to you anytime we can.
Well, thank you. And I can really think of no issue more important in the grand scheme of things than preserving our constitutional rights and our nation's security. And again, we thank you for all that you're doing because you we need more good people like you in Congress. Thanks so much for joining us. And I want to thank everyone listening today, all of our AMAC members. Thank you for tuning in. And if you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, you're missing out because you can watch this show. You can track breaking news right there on your smartphone. Go ahead and download that free app, the AMAC News app, and make sure, please, to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and have a great day, everyone.
You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens. To learn more about Amac and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.